You are now watching Zach Lesage, the best place to learn about competitive Pokemon TCG. Let's get it! What's poppin' peeps? Welcome back to the channel, Zach Lesage here. Today we're going to be covering over the top 20 best decks in format. So if you watched the video yesterday, and that's the Monday top 10 video every single Monday, 12 p.m. noon Eastern, we're going to be covering the second half of that, decks 11 through 20. So if you want to learn more about the whole metagame, this is the video to check out. If you like this content, by all means give it a thumbs up. It's a free way to help support the video. Subscribe to the channel. We're on the path to 10K. We're about 500 peeps out there, give or take, so I mean I think we could totally get there. Help it out by subscribing, let your friends know about the channel, and put your guesses for the decks that are going to be in this video in the comments below, and feel free to let me know anything you want to know in the comments below. I love to spark a conversation, and I get back to every single person's comments. That being said, let's jump into our number 20 deck. Sneaking through the shadows to number 20 is Dragapult VMAX. Now, this deck has not made the top 20 list in the past few weeks, if not a month, but Dragapult VMAX making its way back in there somehow. I mean, I think it's due to a lot of a lack of play of other decks. There were only 21 decks observed in the past week. 21st was actually Sylveon, so it's not going to make the list, but it's probably because players are just kind of going with what's known. They understand the metagame, and they understand what works and what doesn't work. So maybe there's only top 15 decks, and the other decks are just okay. By all means, this means that there's opportunities for decks to see success in the metagame, and I don't necessarily think Dragapult is going to make its way back up. To me, it seems like it's a worse Mew. This deck is similar to a Jolteon VMAX deck, where you're trying to snipe some damage with Max Phantom and really choose where you're placing your damage counters. The Dark weakness is really what holds this deck back into the lower half of the top 20 and completely out of the top 20 entirely. So keep that in mind as we progress through here, that Dragapult likely will not be able to be a strong contender. Now, if you look in the pinned comment below, there is going to be reference videos and lists for most of these decks in this video. By all means, check those out if you are looking to kind of play around with these decks and experiment more with the metagame. Also, if you're looking to build any of these decks, you can go to PTCGO plug in code ZLesage5 to save 5% on your next order of codes. If you want to grow as a player, you can also go to metafy.gg. I have a link in the description. You can get coached by me personally. I have a lot of things that I can offer you and really show you how to play any of the decks in the available format. Squirming all the way to number 19 and not making the list last week or a few weeks before that is MALAMAR. Now, MALAMAR is all about using Rapid Strike tentacles, ripping Rapid Strike cards from your hand, and showing them to your opponent to do lots of damage. This deck is, it kind of had a peak and then really fell off. I don't think it necessarily had the success that players were looking for in any particular format, and it is one of those things where it's a single prize card deck. They often fall into the same category. Players might like playing Galarian Weezing a little bit more. Players might like playing other single prize card decks or variance decks, such as the Galarian Surfetch deck that has both the Galarian Zapdos and the Galarian Moltres. Needless to say, MALAMAR is a successful deck. Will it make top 20 next week? Honestly, I'm not sure. I think that this deck gets significantly better in the Brilliant Stars format with cards such as Cynthia's Aspirations and Manaphy. So it's one of those things where MALAMAR is okay right now. There's really nothing wrong with it. There's also nothing really right with it. It can be the right metagame call, but it does struggle to a lot of decks. Needless to say, Jolteon just beats this deck straight up most of the time. That's really where this deck's going to struggle. It might not make the list next week. Quick shooting its way into number 18 and falling all the way from number 10 is INTELEON VMAX. I think this deck picked up a little bit of hype after Gato was able to win a late night event a few weeks back. And this new take on INTELEON VMAX with Rapid Strike Urshifu to try to beat Jolteon seems like it's okay. I think it might struggle with consistency issues, and as much as INTELEON VMAX is really cool, I think this whole deck has really struggled with consistency issues since the beginning. The goal is to basically Rapid Strike energy onto INTELEON VMAX, rip the energy back to your hand, hit 140. Your opponent attacks, you play Cheryl, and you have the Quick Shooting Lion, and you have ways to search everything out with Shady Dealings and Rapid Strike Search. I think, again, like, best of one is really not something that you see for setup decks like this, really pair hand in hand. This is the type of deck that I think could win events. It could be very good, but it often struggles with random decks, random consistency issues, still might lose to Jolteon, so I think under testing, inconsistency issues, this deck can definitely struggle with the metagame. I wouldn't be surprised if this deck fell off completely at the top 20, or if it made it into a similar position it's really a wild card, but I'm not necessarily shooting for the stars with this particular deck. Galloping all the way to number 17 and staying at number 17 last week is Shadow Rider CALYREX VMAX. Now, Underworld Door can only take you so far by accelerating energies and drawing cards, and Max Geist is doing well. It's a good attack where you're doing 10 plus 30 for each energy that you're attaching there. The only issue is that there's no more tag team Pokemon, so you have to commit a lot of energies to a lot of your Pokemon, and you definitely can't really keep up with the speed of Mew VMAX while having the same weakness. So while Shadow Rider CALYREX is a good deck, no one's ever going to deny that it's a good deck. It struggles so much with the format just because of the amount of Mew hates that trickles onto this deck. So Path to the Peak, trying to stop Genesect, stops Underworld Door, and dark decks that are trying to stop Mew are stopping Shadow Rider CALYREX VMAX, and random other decks just such as Zacian and Zamazenta have things that are going to be blocking their VMAX Pokemon from attacking. I think Shadow Rider CALYREX is an unfortunate case where it's not a bad deck, the metagame just really can't handle it, and with Mew VMAX being the default best deck in formats, this deck is often going to see less success. Maybe we'll see Shadow Rider make a comeback in Brilliant Stars with Arceus V that might breathe some life into this deck, but right now I keep this horse at the back of the binder. Breezing its way into number 16 and jumping up from number 19 last week is LEAFEON VMAX. I think this deck is seeing a little bit more play as players anticipate the actual recent release of LEAFEON V-Star. I do want to let everyone know that LEAFEON V-Star is on PTCGO right now. It is a promo coming out before Brilliant Stars is released, and at the time of recording this, I'm recording this Monday night around 11:30 at night, it just was available on the Limitless platform. So we'll probably see this deck spike up in the near future, with LEAFEON V-Star giving this deck boss's orders once during the game. Now, this deck's all about Grass Knot, hitting your opponent's Pokemon for the retreat cost, Galar Mine increases it, and you have Tool Jammer to shut off their Air Balloon. I think LEAFEON VMAX is a great deck. It's just Mew and LEAFEON both have 0 retreat costs, which doesn't necessarily help out Grass Knot. Will LEAFEON V-Star breathe some life into this deck? I absolutely think so, and I wouldn't be surprised to see LEAFEON making it through the higher teens, so maybe like an 11, 12, 13 kind of spot, or maybe even making it into the lower half of the top 10. We'll have to see if it kind of makes everyone excited and players start playing this deck again. I think new cards really have that effect on a lot of peeps, so we'll have to see how it goes. By all means, if I were to cut anything out of this deck for a LEAFEON V-Star, and this is just off the top of my head, I think it'd be a Fan of Waves, but I do want to dive into that deck once I get a little bit more time with the card. Countering the meta all the way to number 15 and dropping from number 12 last week is Counterbox. Or at least that's the name that I've given this deck, or I think a few others have. This deck is like playing typical counter Pokemon for the format. In this form, it has Suicune V. It's a generally strong attacker that you could power up with Melony or Raihan. You have Galarian Moltres V, which is strong against darkness weak Pokemon such as Mew VMAX, and you have Galarian Zapdos V, which is great against Gengar, Jolteon, and a few other decks in the mix. I think this deck is okay. That's kind of my thing. It seems a little bit scattered, and it continuously sees less and less play. I think it's one of those things where as players have adopted to better format counters such as Gengar VMAX or anything else like that, they've just kind of forgotten about this deck. So this deck kind of had a bit of hype behind it. I think that there's other better decks, like I said, Gengar, maybe even the Galarian Surfetch deck, that kind of have a better place in the metagame than this deck. Now, in future formats or in the right metagame, a properly built Counterbox deck can counter the right decks, and you can often run into free matchups if you choose the right Pokemon that fit those types. So if you have a Dark Pokemon from you, you're good. If you have a Pokemon to beat Jolteon, you're good. I mean, literally, Moltres, Zapdos are very strong cards, can counter a lot of the metagame. We'll have to see how they do going forward with Entei V, Raikou V, and other cards coming out in Brilliant Stars. I truly think this deck could be a gem, but again, it will take a strong understanding of the metagame, and I don't necessarily know if players are going to be necessarily playing this deck for the rest of the Fusion Strike format. Rapid striking it up at number 14, and jumping up from number 17 is Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX with Galarian Moltres V. If you've ever watched one of these videos, you can see that I often kind of come down on this deck a little bit harsh, and here's my reason why. The deck's half Rapid Strike Urshifu, which is trying to snipe things around, and it's fighting type, so it's relevant. It's also dark type, so it's relevant against Mew, so like you could be Jolteon, Mew, Gengar, all this stuff. I think that as Gengar is getting more popular, we're going to see Rapid Strike Urshifu resurge a little bit. I don't necessarily think Rapid Strike is a strong call for the metagame. I mean, in some ways it beats a couple of the decks, but like, I think there's just better decks to be playing. I'd rather be playing Single Striker Gengar, or maybe even the Galarian Surfetch deck, than this Fighting Dark deck. It often feels like this deck kind of crumbles apart in your hands, and I mean, I don't know, you can call me a hater, I'm just really not a fan of this deck. If you are a fan of this deck, by all means bring it to the late night series and prove it there. It's one of those things where like I'm always ready for a player to really play their deck, see how it is, have some fun in the process. But for me as a player and my playstyle, I'm just not about this deck. I feel like I'd rather be playing something that's a little bit more powerful, such as Gengar, that's kind of getting the same job done. Galloping all the way to number 13 and dropping from number 9, it's Ice Rider CALYREX VMAX. This deck is all about using Melony to power up Ride of the High King or Max Lance. You got your choice of attack on if you want to kind of go for more of an efficient attack that can kind of two-shot things, or maybe one-shot with Max Lance. I think this deck is like okay, it's kind of like a neutral deck, but I think there's better neutral decks out there that get the job done. You might hear me bring up Gengar, but Gengar has a pretty solid matchup against most decks in the formats, and I think that Ice Rider is kind of the same thing, except Ice Rider just also loses Zacian. So you can see where this deck can be successful, because you don't necessarily lose to much, but you also don't necessarily have easy matchups against many things. There's not too many fire decks in the formats, whereas Gengar destroys Mew, the best deck in the formats. So really, you got to pick some battles, and I mean, decks can fall out of placement in the metagame. Unfortunately, I think that's the case with Ice Rider. I could see it jumping back into the top 10 as it was previously, because there's really nothing wrong with it. There's just nothing necessarily 100% right with it. Although it is really cool, and I think it gets much better in our Brilliant Stars metagame. Gusting all the way to number 12 and breathing some fire on the metagame is Victini VMAX. This deck fell from I guess it didn't fall, it went up. What am I talking about? This deck boosted from number 16 last week, and you wanna know what? I think Victini VMAX is one of those like kind of mid decks, similar to Ice Rider. It doesn't necessarily beat the metagame, it doesn't necessarily lose to the metagame. It's cool. It's got Victini's, it has max victory. You're really just trying to attack Pokemon V, Pokemon V Max, whatever. Crushing Hammer and Fan and Catcher and Path can definitely throw your opponent into a blender or a situation they don't want to see. Maybe with LEAFEON V-Star seeing a little bit of traction, or maybe starting to see a bit of traction, this deck might pick up a little bit of steam. I really think that this deck could be anywhere between the top 15 to top 10, but I don't necessarily see exactly where it's going to land. It's just not as good as other top decks in the format, but that doesn't necessarily mean it bad. And my apologies, I'm trying to hiccup my way out of this, and that's going to be what we're going to put in there. Comment below if you heard me hiccup or not. That's going to be the secret Easter egg for this video. Rapid striking it up at number 11, and also at number 11 last week, sticking at number 11 for the past few weeks actually, is Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX with Melony. Now this deck seems to be seeing less and less play, and less success, which dropped it out of being a top 5 deck all the way to a lower top 10, and now it's stuck at 11. With new decks that are kind of piquing players' interest, such as Galarian Surfetch V, players are not necessarily picking this fighting deck. So if you look at fighting decks as a whole, players are really playing other decks, and Gengar VMAX spiking a bunch of tournaments. I mean, it's absolutely blown up. It's one of those things where you gotta ask yourself, is Rapid Strike Urshifu poised to make a comeback? I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Rapid Strike Urshifu, at least a variant, make it into the top 10 this week. Whether or not it's Rapid Strike Melony that's kind of accelerating energies faster, I think this is the best variant of it. We'll have to see, but I think Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX, very, very, very good deck, just not necessarily well positioned in this metagame, but it does have the opportunity to kind of spike up with all the play from Gengar and Jolteon and other decks in the top 10 right now. And that's what we got going on for this video today, peeps. Hopefully you enjoyed learning more about these decks. If you're looking to learn more about Pokemon, I do offer coaching on Metafy. You can check that link out in the description. You'd also help support the stream by maybe picking up a playmat from your playmat, picking up some codes from PTCGO store using code Lesage5. There's a bunch of ways. Check out the description, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and I will catch up with all y'all later. Peace out and have a great day. I truly appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch this video. It means the world to me. and my goal with this channel is to spread my love of the game and knowledge with our entire Pokemon TCG community. If you haven't already, help signal boost this video to other Pokemon TCG fans by liking it, sharing it with your friends, and subscribing to the channel. Hopefully we reach our goals really soon. Check out this recommended video, and have yourself a great day. Thanks.